And on to this now. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is headed to Israel today, working with officials to reach a lasting ceasefire agreement. As a grim milestone in the war in Israel is happening this week, the Gaza Health Ministry claiming 40,000 Palestinians have died since the war began over 10 months ago. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk saying, quote, this unimaginable situation is overwhelmingly due to recurring failures by the Israeli Defense Forces to comply with the rules of war. Well, Israeli officials maintaining that they try to minimize civilian casualties, but the news is yet another obstacle to the ongoing ceasefire talks that will resume in Cairo next week. Those talks taking an additional urgency as the threat of an Iranian attack in reprisal for the killing of an Hamas leader in Tehran last month hangs over the region. So joining us now to talk about all this and really unpack it is Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense Democracies, Daoud. Thanks for joining us, David. These negotiations have been going on for months now. What are the sticking points holding up a deal right now?
Thank you for having me on. I think part of the sticking points has been the identity of the hostages that Hamas kidnapped on October 7th. How many of them who would be returned? How many of them would be alive? The Israelis were demanding a list of such hostages, and Hamas was hesitant to offer such a list. Part of it is also the prisoners, the security prisoners that Hamas is demanding in return. These are people with blood on their hands that the Israelis have in Israeli prison, and there's been some hesitation about releasing them. It seems, according to news today in Israel, that there's been some progress in that regard, but Israeli officials are making it clear that that progress has been between Israel and mediators rather than Hamas. The other part of it is the presence of Israeli forces within the Gaza Strip, and where they'd be present, specifically the Philadelphia corridor. This is the border with Egypt, where countless tunnels have now been found, smuggling tunnels. So the Israelis are insisting on retaining some degree of security control over that. Hamas, the Egyptians, don't want that. And whether this war continues or not, Israel's goals of dismantling Hamas militarily and as a governmental structure have not changed to my mind. They may change during the course of these negotiations, but they haven't changed yet. And those are the sticking points.
And this number that we're showing here, this 40,000 dead, this is according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. Critics say that number is actually inflated. Do you believe those numbers?
Look, I'm skeptical because those numbers, first of all, do not distinguish between combatants and non-combatants. The Israelis are saying that at least 14 to 15,000 Hamas fighters have been killed by them. Hamas is not distinguishing, and not just are they not distinguishing between the combatants and non-combatants in those numbers, assuming those numbers are accurate, but in terms of how they conduct their war fighting, they don't engage in distinction. Meaning, you'll have people who are under the age of majority, 16, 17, who are not in military uniform, who are fighting in Hamas's ranks. How are they being counted if they are, engaging Israeli troops and being killed in response? And look, collateral damage is going to occur in a situation like in Gaza, where Hamas has spent the better part of 18 years enmeshing itself in the civilian population.
Yeah, well, and essentially using them as human shields, hiding under hospitals and schools and things. But war is ugly, and no matter how you slice it, the numbers are too many. Hamas has accused Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of bending to internal political pressure and undermining these talks. What's the truth, do you think, behind these claims?
I mean, Israel is a democratic country. The government is a coalition government. Obviously, Prime Minister Netanyahu has to take the consensus of the coalition into account. Now, whether that is a wise consensus or not is a different question. At the same time, I think Israel's goals from the outset of this war, the idea of total victory, and not in a lightning fashion. These are far-reaching goals to destroy Hamas militarily, not just defeat it in a limited sense, but destroy it militarily as a governmental structure. This is a slow process of erosion that is going to take a long time. But I think it's one that after the horrors of October 7th, any prime minister, not just Prime Minister Netanyahu, any Israeli official, had they been in prime minister's position, would have made the same decision, would be pursuing the same goals.
Okay, how about this? Hamas's new boss, Yahya Sinwar, he may be the most wanted man in the world, right? And as a result, his security, of course, is incredibly tight. He's communicating only through notes and messengers, reportedly. Is Sinwar's situation slowing talks down?
Look, I think the fact that he's now the head of Hamas complicates matters because it shows that Hamas, I mean, this is to be expected. Hamas is there is no moderate wing or conciliatory wing within Hamas. There's a pragmatic wing and a more or less pragmatic wing. But the choice of Sinwar to replace Haniyeh demonstrates, one, that Hamas is doubling down on the mentality that led them to carry out the October 7th attack. And because of Yahya Sinwar's proximity to Iran, is demonstrating that Hamas wants to enter the Iranian orbit even more tightly. And what this means is that any deal that would be achieved, that would achieve a ceasefire, would not be permanent, in the sense that there would be a permanent, forever cessation of hostilities between Israel and Gaza. It means that Hamas will use the nucleus of whatever forces remain after the ceasefire to rebuild, and as their leadership has said repeatedly over the past 10 months, prepare to attack Israel in an October 7th style attacks again in the future.
Yeah, and many thought that there'd be that retaliation from Iran, days, a week ago even. The region's still on edge after the assassination of the previous Hamas chief. Many expected the promised Iranian revenge attack would have happened by now. Why do you think it hasn't materialized?
I think because if you look at the resistance axis as gold, and in some ways we can look at the negotiations going on now in Doha as not just a negotiation between Israel and Hamas, but a negotiation between Israel and the resistance axis. The goals laid out were that Hamas would survive. Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah said this in his first speech after October 7th on November 3rd, when he said, "We want the Palestinian resistance, specifically Hamas, to emerge victorious." So their goal is to achieve a premature ceasefire, to have the outcome we just spoke about. And they don't want to jeopardize that. So if this achieves their goals by holding out on the retaliatory strike, by using the threat of a retaliatory strike as a stick to induce the Israelis to accept the ceasefire deal, and to induce the West, induce a sense of urgency in the West, so they'll press the Israelis to achieve a ceasefire deal, then they'll have achieved their goal. The resistance axis will have achieved the goal that it laid out from the outset of this conflict. So they don't want to jeopardize ceasefire talks because they're looking at the long term.
And many are bracing for protests to begin at college campuses, now that schools are getting back into session. Senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense Democracies, David Daoud, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be on.
All right, coming up on NewsNation now, Mr.